JJ to JJ. The Vikings' future is set after drafting quarterback JJ McCarthy and making Justin Jefferson the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. We dig into the 2024 fantasy outlook for the entire Minnesota Vikings offense on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We are still going through our 32 NFL teams. We're going to be going through it for a while now, but we've hit all of the NFC West teams and 3 of the NFC North teams. We're finishing off the NFC North with the Minnesota Vikings today. And it was perfect timing because Justin Jefferson just this morning gets his 4-year, $140 million contract to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the league, which we expected to happen. But we have a lot of changes this year with the Vikings. So Kirk Cousins is gone, right? And it might be Sam Darnold. It might be JJ McCarthy at quarterback. So that's going to change up things for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and T.J. Hockenson when he comes back from his torn ACL. And then also they added Aaron Jones. So a different looking backfield. This is just going to be a very, very different offense this year. So let's start right off the top with the star, Justin Jefferson. Coming off like an injury-riddled season where he only played 10 games, was wide receiver 5 in points per game. We know the year before that, he was wide receiver 1. The year before that, wide receiver 4. He's just been a stud always. Are you worried about Justin Jefferson when it comes to the injuries from last year and then also the quarterback situation?
Yeah, let's examine where he is right now. I mean, in most cases, he's the wide receiver 3 by ADP, but in a lot of consensus rankings, he's the wide receiver 4. And if you wonder who would be ahead of him, well, it's the usual suspects, CeeDee Lamb, who's also looking for his big contract and is probably very thrilled on what Justin Jefferson got. And then you have Tyreek Hill. He's already been paid by the Dolphins along with Jalen Waddle, his teammate. And then you have Jamar Chase. He's waiting for his big payday. He'll probably be the highest paid receiver in the NFL next year. So those are the 3 guys ahead of Justin Jefferson. That's the end of the list. Now, if you're looking at other positions, Christian McCaffrey and Breece Hall are the guys that are mostly ahead of him as well. So again, that's where you're looking at Justin Jefferson. I don't think you can go lower than that, as Michelle pointed out. His finishes are top 5 consistently here. And with the injuries, we're a little concerned that it was an injury-riddled season last year. I think he would have been a lot more effective maybe if he wasn't slowed down there. And I think this year, I think the concern is a little bit different. It's about the quarterback situation. Kirk Cousins has been really good at feeding him the ball with his big arm all over the field and putting up some numbers here. Now we're not sure who the quarterback is. I mean, Sam Darnold, right now, if you believe some of the early camp reports here in OTAs, he's looked great, but so is JJ McCarthy, so is Jordan Addison. So everything is great with Minnesota and their offense, but it's up to us to figure out what's not going to be so great here. So, and we look at Darnold and McCarthy, I think I'm going to be a lot more excited if it's McCarthy. I don't trust Sam Darnold at all here. Like, we've seen him, it's just not there. Like, we've had a little bit of flash with the Panthers where he was scoring those rushing touchdowns and like, oh no, here's Sam Darnold as a fantasy asset. You know, he fizzled right away. They moved on. The 49ers signed him as a backup, and he didn't really have a lot of real interest even in that situation, right? Even as a backup, we wanted behind Brock Purdy. So this is the tough part here. But keep in mind, they lost KJ Osborne. They have a lot of targets available. TJ Hockenson is going to miss probably a few games to start the year. So you have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison probably dominating the targets here. So I think McCarthy eventually is going to start. I think he's that good. I think he's seen the Vikings offense enough. I don't think they really want to start Sam Darnold because we know he's just going to be a bridge guy that's going to fizzle in 1 year and he's gone. Where JJ McCarthy, the clock's ticking. You gave him great receivers, great offensive line. Just get him out there. So I think you'll see him out there. And that's going to make me feel confident about Jefferson. But I think it's fair to say those three receivers are ahead of him right now. So, again, no lower than wide receiver 5, but I think you can make a case that he belongs at wide receiver 4.
Yeah, he's just so productive. I don't think it really matters who the quarterback is. I do think he's quarterback proof. Because I mean, last year we didn't really get to see him play all too much. It's always been Kirk Cousins, right? And then
Yeah.
it's not like he really played with Josh Dobbs at all. He played like 7 offensive snaps the whole time that Josh Dobbs played. Jaron
Yeah.
Hall played 13 snaps. So but we did get the games with Nick Mullins. In the 3 games that Nick Mullins started, Jefferson averaged over 130 receiving yards per game in those 3 games. And in 2 of those games, he scored 31 fantasy points and 23 fantasy points in half PPR. The other game was 12 points. So it's not like he killed you. 7 receptions, 84 yards. He just didn't get a touchdown in that game. I will say, like with JJ McCarthy, maybe the touchdown upside is limited because
Yeah.
we talked about on our Friday show with Caleb Williams and those rookie quarterbacks. They can definitely be a little risky there with their touchdowns, but his yards and his targets are so safe. So I am completely fine where he's at early in the first round, going after Lamb, Hill, and Chase. But like Jefferson, I'll say Jefferson and St. Brown, very, very hard to choose between. Which one are you going with?
Yeah, I might go Jefferson over St. Brown, but I'm looking at Tyreek Hill and Jamar Chase. And I think you do have to think about a little bit that Jalen Waddle and T. Higgins are in those situations. We know the big reason why CeeDee Lamb is number 1 is like there's no one else in Dallas, and he's going to just eat up all the targets. Like there's no one even similar. At least Jefferson has Addison, right? But all these other guys, I mean, it's really just getting into the weeds a little bit here, like and picking who's going to outproduce the other here. I think it's all going to be close. It might come down to the touchdowns, and if that's the case, we know Jefferson is probably going to be capped on touchdowns, and Lamb might score a little bit more often. Jamar Chase also is capable of scoring on shorter passes as well. So I would say I would go Lamb, Chase, and then Jefferson and St. Brown. I think if you're in a league that is I don't know, like if volume is key, I think St. Brown may end up with more catches this year than Jefferson. So something to watch out for. And he's a little bit more durable. So I'd say it's very close. I think it's just your personal preference, but what I really like is you can't go wrong about any of these guys. I think Tyreek Hill is the one guy who would drop a little bit because of Tua and maybe being a little big play dependent with Waddle. It's just hard to keep recreating that. And he's getting a little older. All these other guys are in their prime.
Yeah, I think I might be okay leaning St. Brown just for the 2024 season over Jefferson when you're
That's
making
fair.
that early first round pick. Jefferson definitely has a higher ceiling, and he's absolutely amazing. But St. Brown just feels very, very safe. He's
Yeah.
going to targets. He has a good quarterback. He's in a good system. So that just feels safer to me. Now, quickly to hit on JJ McCarthy, because he's probably not going to be too relevant for fantasy this year in a 1 quarterback league. His ADP right now is quarterback 26, 167th overall. We don't even honestly know if he's starting right away. Like, I
Yeah.
know you're saying like they should start him, right? Like there's no reason to start Sam Darnold. He has the worst stats among all quarterbacks since being drafted in 2018. Like he's absolutely terrible. But at the same time, we know what teams do, right? They like to start these veterans first for whatever reason. So maybe he doesn't start the first couple weeks, but do you think he can be a reliable fantasy starter once he does get in there?
I mean, the weapons are just too good because if there's a little bit of a delay, then he's going to have the key target for a rookie at tight end and Hockenson being back. But you look at the targets there, Jefferson, Addison, and Hockenson, you could do a lot worse as rookie quarterback. And we looked at Caleb Williams, pretty good for him too, with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Roma Dinze. And then you get to the tight ends. These teams are loaded with some weapons here. And the difference, I think, between the Vikings and the Bears, the Vikings offensive line is reliable here. You have Christian Darrisaw out there. So JJ McCarthy's going to have time to throw to these guys downfield. And Kevin O'Connell, I think this system is a little bit just conducive for early success here for this quarterback. So again, Sam Darnold does not interest me at all. Like I don't want to get him. I'm not even going to be enthused with him as a streamer. But McCarthy, if he's starting, okay, immediate streaming status that you can look at. I don't think he's going to be QB 25 anymore. if we know he's starting, right? I think part of that ranking is built in to say that is he going to start? So again, the weapons are just too good here. So I think there's a good chance. Maybe we're sleeping on him a little bit. We look at Caleb Williams a lot. We look at Jaden Daniels a lot, partly because of the running. That's also a factor. And McCarthy's not going to give you much there. But if you're looking for pocket type production and just put up numbers, I mean, you can almost fall backwards and get some production with those three receivers, right? So I think I want to see him on the field. Right now, I think you're right. He is a dynasty super flex type quarterback, ideally, right? In one QB leagues, absolutely not. You'll take a flyer on him late to take a shot. But again, that's where McCarthy is there right now. Is I think just a lot of upside. I don't know if you're going to see it immediately. So I'm going to say he caps out as a mid-range QB2 should he start all season.
It will be interesting because the Vikings have been so pass heavy under Kevin O'Connell. Will he keep that with a rookie quarterback or with Sam Darnold? Especially like you only really have Aaron Jones, who's 29 years old. It's not like they have running backs back there to change up their system. So I still expect them to pass quite often. We'll see what that comes to with these quarterbacks. But that's a really good thing for guys like Jordan Addison and T.J. Hockenson, who we're going to get into in our next segment. Like there should, even though the quarterback situation isn't ideal, there still should be some room for these guys to perform this season.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what those weapons can do that are not Justin Jefferson with the new change here with the quarterback. So excited to see if they can open those guys up for sure in 2024. All right, we've got a couple of finals set here. Finally, we're waiting still for the NBA Finals to tip off here between the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks. Well, while we waited for that, we have a Stanley Cup final. It's a long way between Florida and Edmonton, but those are the two teams playing. Edmonton trying to end the Canadian Stanley Cup champion drought there. But the best thing is you can get on the actions. Winner take all time. Here it is. NBA and NHL. FanDuel is giving a shot to bring home a big win of your own. You might not lift the Larry Ryan Trophy or the Stanley Cup, but right now you can get a big win because new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. It's an interesting one there in that Panthers-Oilers series that you have the Panthers favored, but the guy to win the MVP of the series is Connor McDavid, probably the best player on the ice in that series. So a lot of interesting things you can look at on both series here as we close NBA and NHL. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. Again, that's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we're ways away from the Super Bowl next time with NHL and NBA wrapping up. NFL, we're talking more about the Vikings here. And Jordan Addison, very intriguing player here in year 2. Michelle, he was wide receiver 28 in points per game last year. What are you expecting from him? The reports so far have been really good.
It's really hard to know what you're going to get out of Jordan Addison, right? So last year, he played half the season without Justin Jefferson. And then he played half the season without Kirk Cousins. So it's not like we really got to see any idea of how he'll be used in this particular offense with Justin Jefferson there. But I'll say Addison saw Jefferson saw 6 or fewer targets in 9 of 17 games last year. So very low target volume for most of the year. Had more than 8 targets in just 3 games, never more than 10 targets. And then the 6 of the 8 games that he had more than 6 targets were when Jefferson was out, right? So that's when he was seeing more of the volume. And then obviously when Jefferson came back, his target share went down. And he only had really one great fantasy week without Kirk Cousins, another solid fantasy week. But week 15 with Nick Mullins is pretty much his only great fantasy week without Kirk Cousins there. I'm not sure McCarthy or Darnold will be able to support 2 good wide receivers in fantasy. However, it is Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and really nobody else there because we're going to get into T.J. Hockenson and when we expect him back. But like if they do continue to be so pass heavy, the ball has to go to more than just Jefferson. Like it can't be 400 targets to Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, that worries me when either you have a rookie quarterback or you have a veteran who's kind of limited. They tend to target one guy a little bit too much. And that's not what we want here. We want the ball to spread around to Jordan Addison. I think that's why his ADP and ranking is pretty modest. ADP of 41 right now, 39. So well out, I'd say a few spots out of the wide receiver 3 consideration, which might be a bit surprising just because, again, he's the number 2 in a pretty pass-happy offense. He's a first-round pick. I don't think we're going to quite buy that he's going to be the next Amon-Ra St. Brown out of USC, lining up in the slot and just having a huge volume. So he's a tough one to evaluate because you're right. He had a lot of variables last year as a rookie. He has more variables this year. It's very tough to break down. I mean, the only thing that you can say is you don't have a lot else at wide receiver. So that's going to help him. And the Hockenson injury is also going to help early in the season. We saw that with Hockenson when he was hurt. Remember in Detroit, we saw him on Ross St. Brown go off a little bit and kind of develop there as a rookie. That same thing could happen for Addison in year 2. But again, I think that's about right. I think you have to be, he's got some upside as a wide receiver 3, but we're going to draft him as a wide receiver 4.
And I'll say his ADP is friendly, right? I mean, yeah, he has a lot of question marks in this offense, but the guys he's going around have a ton of question marks, especially at the wide receiver position. Like, would you rather Hollywood Brown or Jordan Addison? Because they're going very, very close to each other.
Yeah, I think Hollywood Brown's role is going to be a little bit bigger than we think. I think they'll bring on Xavier Worthy a little bit slower than we expect. So I don't know. This attaching to Mahomes, I think, is the tiebreaker there.
I think I'd go with Addison. What about Ladd McConkey, rookie for the Chargers, 96 overall, or Jordan Addison at 82nd overall?
Again, we talked about Ladd McConkey. I think there's a clear path to targets. There's so much vacated there that he's going to get the ball, and it's Justin Herbert, and it's a good offense that we trust a little bit more than McCarthy and Darnold.
And then one more, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who might be the third target on his offense for the Seahawks, or Jordan Addison, where we know like he's pretty much going to be the second target this year. Which one would you rather have?
I think I'm going to go with Addison because then you're looking at Geno Smith and Sam Howell. So then the quarterback situation is rather similar, and I think I would actually prefer the McCarthy-Darnold situation.
Moving on to T.J. Hockenson. So he was a beast last year, right? If you drafted him, you were so happy. Tight end 3 in fantasy points per game behind only Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce. And he was right there. He averaged 11.4 points per game while Laporta and Kelce averaged 11.5. Like he was top-notch elite fantasy option last year. Unfortunately, he tore both his ACL and MCL in week 16 on December 24th. So very, very, very late in the year. He is, using quotes right now, ahead of schedule, like every player is coming off of injury in June, apparently. But I just cannot imagine with how late this injury happened, with how bad the injury was, that he's not put on the PUP list to start the year, which would be automatic 4 games that he missed. But also the Vikings have an early bye. Their bye week is in week 6. So I really don't think he comes back until week 7 against his former team, the Detroit Lions. But I think if I had to pick a game where he's back, it wouldn't be till week 7.
Yeah, I think you have to kind of plan for this because he's a great asset. He's on the field. He may not be the same player either at first. And then, again, he's got the variables. He's coming back to a new set of quarterbacks. And we don't know at that point if it's going to be Darnold or McCarthy starting when he comes back either. So a little clarity there would help. I think McCarthy helps because of tight end and security blanket with a history of rookie quarterbacks. So we kind of want that. And we don't want some guy just targeting Jefferson all the time. But I think Hockenson has been a big part of their offense. They traded the division rival on purpose here to get that element in this offense. So when you look at Hockenson, this is how I would play it. Right now, he's ranked around tight end 12, tight end 13. So borderline tight end 1, because here's why. You have Brock Bowers, Dalton Schultz, Cole Kmet. Those who are going right ahead of him. That is slowly dying from tight end 1 value. So what I would do is look for someone behind him that you could maybe stream. Pat Freiermuth, I like him a lot this year. You have Luke Musgrave, who has some upside with the Packers. So what I would do is draft Hockenson first and then go get a guy that you can stream a little bit for the weeks that he's not here. And then you're sitting on him, and then maybe that guy breaks out, and then you move him to a team that needs a tight end, and you just plug in Hockenson the rest of the way. And could work out beautifully, Michelle, right? If he's sat through the bye, then you get him back. You've survived the first few weeks with a good replacement, and then you get Hockenson down the stretch. So you have to be very careful. You don't want to overdraft him. You don't want to draft him as like tight end 5 through 8 when you're not sure. But if you can get him calculated there at the bottom of the tight ends, now I think I would want him over all those guys that I mentioned, Bauer, Schultz, Komet, because he has so much upside and so much certainty when he comes back to produce. So it's going to be a little bit of a calculated game that you play here when you should jump on Hockenson. And I think the answer is when is you'll know. If the other options are uninspiring, they're across the board, and you say, wait a second, this player can be a top 3, borderline top 1 tight end here. I'm going to go after him.
Yeah, and also this is why it's so important to know your league rules and roster spots before you draft. So if there's an IR spot, if you have an IR spot available to you throughout the season, draft TJ Hockenson. You can draft him, throw him on the IR spot till he comes back. That definitely, I love that method if you have an IR spot. I will say something interesting about McCarthy when looking at can he like support Jefferson, Addison, and Hockenson. Just looking at Michigan, he highly targeted 3 guys and 3 guys only. Like he used the big 3, and it was 2 wide receivers and 1 tight end, and they all had pretty much the same exact workload. So 48 receptions, 47 receptions, 45, and that was Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson at wide receiver. And then Colston Loveland was second on the team, Michigan, in receiving yards. So we've seen him spread the ball around. Doesn't mean that's going to happen in the NFL, but just thought it was interesting. Like he is used to the big 3 and only those 3. And maybe that's kind of how he handles this Vikings offense, which would be really good if they could just limit to those 3 with the targets there. We're going to get into the Vikings backfield in our final segment because man, was it brutal last year, but possibly Aaron Jones at 29 years old can fix it. I don't know if I have high hopes for him doing that, but we'll get your opinions and we'll talk through that in our final segment. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. I have used this app a gazillion times for all of my ticketing needs, whether it's a sporting event, a concert, a comedy show, anything like that. I just hop on the Game Time app because I know they always have my back. They're the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. All you do is you buy the tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps and you're set. You get images sent directly to your phone, so you know exactly what to expect when you buy. And then you don't have to like dig through your email or anything. It just comes right onto the app. You can just press the little download button into your wallet. Everything is just so simple. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Aaron Jones gets released by the Packers this offseason, and immediately the Vikings jump on that and sign him. I really think it was like one day, right? He got released by the Packers, and the very next day the Vikings signed him. So last year, Aaron Jones ends as the running back 27 in fantasy points per game. He's been struggling with health, right? Last year was just a disaster of health. Suffered a hamstring injury in week 1. Didn't really come back to play at all until week 7. And then he suffered an MCL. He sprained his MCL in week 11 and then didn't come back till week 15. And then the rest of the year, week 16 through the divisional round, he was on fire, right? But what do you expect out of Aaron Jones this year? The guy on fire at the end of last year, or a 29-year-old who struggles to stay on the field?
Yeah, I think they just wanted to clean up the backfield in terms of finding one guy that you could keep on the field. He's going to do the little things right with the rookie quarterback. He's going to pass protect there and keep him upright in other situations where he's not running routes. So I think that's what they want to do. They like maybe Aaron Jones as being a valuable guy, and he's a pretty good locker room guy as well. So I think that was also a factor here. And I think they were just tired of Alexander Mattison. He wasn't getting the job done here really consistently, and I don't think you're going to just turn back the clock to Dalvin Cook. He's too old. Jones is. So what I like about Jones is he's going to be in a lot of good opportunities here. So there should be some decent receiving work for him. And we didn't see a lot of that from the Vikings backs. In fact, Madison kind of overachieved in that area because he had some random touchdowns like that, catching the ball. So I think Jones will be involved in that way, but I don't think you're going to see his 2,000 19 for him ever again, where he was just scoring left and right there for the Packers. He's a good complementary scorer. He's going to get decent volume. And that all adds up to me to that classic, like mid-range RB2. And I wouldn't go nuts on him. Again, he's RB27 from last year, 18 might be a little aggressive. Maybe it's like 21 to 24, somewhere there, like one of the last RBs, just because he's a little older and this is a pass-happy offense. And I don't know if you're going to get enough receptions and touchdowns to make up the difference there. So very interesting there, RB18. You look at some guys that might touch the ball a little bit more than him, Kenneth Walker, Ramondre Stevenson, Zamir White, James Conner, and Najee Harris. These are the guys around Aaron Jones. And some of those guys are younger. Some of those are contemporaries here. So it's very interesting to see where Aaron Jones is. And he's a solid, if I'm passing up and I'm waiting a little bit on RB2, that's where I'm going with Jones, but I don't want to overreach and get him after like the first 12 are off the board.
Yeah, I can't imagine he's on too many of my teams. I don't think his price at running back 18 is necessarily unfair, right? At the end of last year, when he was having really good games, RB16, RB17, RB11 weekly finishes. I will say he had over 130 scrimmage yards in each of those games. So you would have liked those fantasy points to be a bit higher, but he wasn't scoring touchdowns. So that was huge. But also, like last year, the Vikings didn't score any touchdowns, right? Their running backs had 4 combined rushing touchdowns, tied for the fewest with the Green Bay Packers, weirdly enough. So I think his ceiling this year is probably like mid to low end RB2, somewhere around the RB18 mark where he's going. I think that's pretty much his ceiling. And I don't really want to draft the RB18 at RB18, right? I want to take a guy a little bit more upside. And then also, it's not even just looking at the other running backs going around him. I mean, the wide receivers going around him are Tank Dell and Terry McLaurin and Jaden Reed. Like, guys with so much upside that can really change your team and be a league like difference maker to help you win a championship. So I'm probably staying away there, but just looking more towards just the running backs. Would you rather Aaron Jones or Ramondre Stevenson? They're pretty much going back to back.
Yeah, Stevenson's younger. I think he's going to be a big part of their offense just because rookie quarterback changed things up. They'll think that they'll run it a lot. And Stevenson, has a pretty good blocking offensive line. So I go Stevenson there. They'll be more dedicated to the run.
Yeah, I'm going. That's such a gross one. It's so hard to have the Patriots running back this year when you expect their offensive ease so bad. But yeah, Eileen Stevenson in PPR leagues. We both would go Najee Harris. We know that. But I would go James Conner over Aaron Jones. What would you do? Because you're the James Conner hater.
That's a good question. I probably I might. Yeah, I think I'll go Jones. I was going to almost side with you there, but no, I think Jones just gives you a little bit more with the receptions that he's going to get involved, and there's not as much competition there.
I'll say with Aaron Jones, older, not as productive, struggles to stay on the field, is Ty Chandler, who's backup running back. He got some chances last year. Is he the better value to go with instead of Aaron Jones? So he's going as a running back 45, 149th overall. You're going to be able to get him in probably the last round of your draft, right? Or one of those if you wanted to go that route. Would you consider him? He's going around guys like Kendre Miller and Antonio Gibson and Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard. Like, would you rather take a chance on Ty Chandler than going with Aaron Jones?
That's a good question. Now, I will try to get in the mind of the GM here, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, where I'm looking at here, why did we sign Aaron Jones so quickly? If Alexander Mattison wasn't all that effective, why didn't Ty Chandler get more work last year? So I don't know if they were just happy with his backfield or said, you know what, we're going to pass most of the time. We just want a guy who can block and check down and catch passes when we need it. We don't want to make this an integral part. So that's the thing. I think they realized that. So they wanted a back that's kind of that, I guess, receiving first, passing game first type of guy who can do that and is just going to run complementary to that. So I don't know. Ty Chandler was hyped a little bit. He had his chance last year. Didn't look all that good. So I'm going to reserve there. But I would take Aaron Jones, but a little bit lower than where he's at. I agree with you totally. Like, if you're going for that RB2, you just don't want to settle. And that's the thing, is like whether you're weighing him versus another RB or weighing him versus a wide receiver or something else, you start looking at those names of wide receiver you mentioned, like, just don't settle. Don't just say, I got to take
Don't be worried to fill your spot. Like, don't be like, I still have my RB2 spot
People
open.
do that all the time.
Like, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, if your RB2 ends up being like your flex play, that's okay. Like if you're stronger wide receiver and you're using one of the flex and your RB2, like one position is going to be weak. I think if you're going to pick one position to be weaker than everything else, I think it's RB2. So be careful. Just don't fill that with somebody that's on the downside.
Absolutely. That is it for today's show. Thank you to all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers, Vinnie and I will be back either tomorrow or Wednesday. We haven't decided yet.
So.
We're going down to 3 days a week just for the month of June, and we'll be right back up in July and August, and then it will be in the season. But likely be back tomorrow talking about an NFC East team. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.